Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear participants of the Nordic Baltic Sustainable Business Summit. Good afternoon, listeners of the streamed event. It's actually the 9th time when partners from Sweden, Norway, Finland, and particularly from the chambers of commerce from those countries and relevant embassies, and the Office of Nordic Council of Ministers and Lithuanian Responsible Business Association LAVA are organizing the Nordic Baltic Sustainable Business Summit. My name is Audronė Alijošiūtė Paulauskienė, and I'm Director of Lithuanian Responsible Business Association LAVA.
Hello everybody, my name is Tadas Kavaliauskas. I'm also from Lithuanian Sustainable Business Association. I'm one of the board member and I'm Chief of Sustainability Officer in Mano bankas.
The title of the conference of 2022 is Supply Chain Management in the Current Geopolitical Context. And of course, it's not easy. Supply chain management definitely consists of many, many elements. It's raw materials, suppliers, manufacturers, it's distribution, it's retailers and customers. I don't believe that we will cover all of them in details, but I do hope that some insights will be useful for you. And before we start, I would like to thank to all contributors of the conference, first of all for the Swedish Embassy in Lithuania, and of course for IKEA Industry Lithuania, who made it available for us to make the summit in real factory, where sustainability is definitely happening. And thanks a lot for Zoom TV, who is helping us to stream the event. 15 Minutes, who is our supporter of the media part. And of course, the event would not happen without the leading chamber. It's Swedish Chamber of Commerce, and it's Laura Borauskienė. And applause for Laura for making this event happening. Thanks, Laura. And I would like to invite the ambassador of Sweden to open the event. So, Inger Buxton, please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dear Vice Minister Šimaitis, Excellencies, colleagues and friends, and thank you very much to our moderators. It is really great to be here today and to have so many of you part here in IKEA Industry as well as participating online. And I would like to direct a special thanks to Inga and your team here at IKEA Industry for hosting this 9th Nordic Baltic Sustainable Business Conference. I would also like to extend a thank you to the Swedish, Norwegian and Finnish Chambers of Commerce, as well as to Lithuania Responsible Business Association and the Nordic Council of Ministers Office here in Lithuania. And of course to all of you partners who are so important for making this summit happening. We have a rich program ahead of us. We have many interesting speakers that we will listen to today that will address the challenges of global supply chains currently are facing, but also opportunities when it comes to sustainable management. We meet at turbulent times. The COVID-19 pandemic severely disrupted the global economy and caused the largest value chain shock in recent history. At the same time, there have been a number of political events, starting with trade wars between not least China and the US, but also unannounced trade measures like China has taken against Lithuania. And then, of course, followed by the Russian brutal invasion and illegal annexation of Ukraine. And this has, of course, contributed to weaken global supply and value chains and have had an immediate impact on commodity and energy prices as well as high inflation. And I think we saw just the day before yesterday the IMF forecast for 2023, and it does indeed look gloomy. And the prediction is that the global growth will slow down even further than previously predicted. And of course, in these times, companies face high risks of supply chain interruptions and have to respond as well to a greater extent to quick changes in political decision making. Because of course governments are required to take action, and there might be protective measures introduced by governments that will have an impact for businesses. It is estimated that up to a quarter of global exports could be relocated in the next few years. And this poses many challenges, but also perhaps opportunities for companies. And there's a need to take actions to secure supply chains, explore new partnerships, and work towards a diversification of suppliers, and also invest in their resilience. And this is of course not an easy task, but a necessary task in the geopolitical situation we are in. And you start to hear buzzwords such as reshoring, nearshoring, and friendshoring. And it will be interesting to hear from speakers how they see those buzzwords in reality. We have a rules-based world order consisting of a multilateral system with global trade, with open markets, and that has served us rather well, and not least actually the Nordic and Baltic countries that are great exporters. This interdependence reduces the risk of conflict and it would not be a good thing if we are seeing the world divided into separate trade blocs. At the same time, we must be able to use instruments such as sanctions at times when we see aggressive and repressive behavior of some governments. At the same time, in order to address global challenges such as climate change and build sustainable future for all of us, we need multilateral cooperation to be upheld. And that is the responsibility of all actors, from states, companies to consumers. The Paris Agreement, the EU emission targets and EU regulations, as well as national legislation, are driving companies to push the sustainability agenda through the supply chain. And of course, customers are also demanding products which comply with sustainability standards. There is also, of course, a risk when we have these economic and energy challenges that we are lowering our ambitions in terms of addressing climate change and bringing about a sustainable future. And this is a bit sad because it's actually now that we need to speed up the green and sustainable transition in order to meet the 2030 Agenda global goals. Your companies have opportunities to influence supply chain sustainability with innovative solutions and to drive behavioral change across the whole value chain, embracing and leading the way with sustainable business practices and solutions. And this will be key for long-term success across the board, not only in terms of supply chain management. I'm very pleased to have my colleague Cecilia Ekholm, Swedish Ambassador for Sustainable Business, who will also participate and share some of the Swedish experiences on the topics of today. And with that, I would once again like to warmly thank IKEA Industry for having us here today. And I'm very much looking forward to hear our speakers, and I hope you all will have an interesting and also inspiring conference today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And the next welcoming speech is coming from Lithuania Ministry of Economic and Innovation, from Vice Minister Karolis Žemaitis. Unfortunately, Karolis can't be here today, but he look to the screen and he write us a welcoming speech.
Hello everyone, greetings to my beloved Kazlų Rūda, and I'm very happy and excited to at least virtually be part of this Sustainable Business Summit. And for the Ministry of Economy and Innovation, sustainability and business development are the topics that go hand in hand, and I'm personally very excited about the program that you will be having today. And in these times, more than in any times, we understand the value of sustainability and also the value of stability and resilience. And currently we understand more and more that these things go hand in hand also. And without sustainable development, without sustainability in the supply chains, we cannot assure smooth transition and transformation of our economy. So I think this is a very good time to have such a discussion, and I think Kazlų Rūda is a perfect place to have such a discussion and such a summit. And in the current geopolitical context, I think it's very valuable to have very concrete examples and success stories to highlight. And I really hope that this day will be about that. So I wish you all the best in the summit, in the discussions, and greetings to everyone, and see you soon.
And of course, the host, Managing Director of IK Industry Lietuva, Inga Urbanavičiūtė. Inga.
Excellencies, ambassadors, dear guests, dear IKEA colleagues here and of course online, it's truly a big privilege of us to welcome all of you in IKEA, to IKEA Industry Lietuva in Kazlų Rūda. As I see, at least some of you feel not very usual, being in the conference which takes place in the middle of production premises. Don't worry, we'll take care about you, all of you. Safety goes first for us, whatever we do. So you got safety instructions first. Now, to make you feel even more comfortable, I will explain very briefly about IKEA Industry Lietuva, just to give you a smell where you are today. So, IKEA Industry Lietuva, we are located in the town of Kazlų Rūda. We are not a small company. We occupy almost 30 hectares of the land in Kazlų Rūda, and the IKEA industry, it's 2 factories. One factory produces particle board, the second factory produces furniture. When it comes to boards production, 160 co-workers, highly automated production, and what we produce, our product is particle board, which is a main material for furniture production nowadays. And the second factory is furniture factory. Most likely you recognize the names of furniture families in IKEA. I truly believe you have seen them in IKEA store. Hauga, Bruseli, Kompang, those families are produced here in Kazlų Rūda, and they are delivered to different destinations around the globe. About 500 of co-workers, and we produce close to 2 million of ready-made furniture in this factory. So once more, welcome to Kazlų Rūda. I wish to all of us to have good discussions, a lot of learnings today, and let's make this event interesting together. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So after opening speech, thank you all who give us so warm and so wide opening speech. So with honor, I introduce the first speaker of 9th Nordic-Baltic Business Summit. So is Cecilia Ekholm. Cecilia is ambassador from Sustainable Business, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Sweden. Cecilia, we can see you. Hello. So,
Hi.
floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this invitation. It's an honor to be joining you, even though it's in a digital format. It would have been much nicer, of course, to be able to join you in the IKEA space where you are at. I'm sure that you have very comfortable chairs. Now, I was invited to talk a little bit about how Swedish businesses work with sustainable supply chains and the current trends and movements. But I thought I would start by just explaining who I am, because it's not maybe the most usual position or function for countries to have an ambassador for sustainable business. But this is actually something that Sweden has had for 20 years. So the first ambassador, which was then the CSR ambassador, was appointed in 2002. And after that, we've had a consecutive line of different ambassadors, but our main responsibility is to promote the government's work when it comes to sustainable business, both to companies here and have a dialogue, but definitely abroad. We've also represented the Swedish government in different international fora, such as the UN, the OECD, and the EU, when it comes to issues related to international sustainable business. I'm also what is called a chairperson of the National Contact Point, and that is one which actually all Nordic countries have, and it's a function that is connected to the OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises. And it is a mechanism that is set to both promote the OECD guidelines and responsible business conduct, and it's also the only grievance mechanism that we have, where anyone, any organization, any individual, anywhere in the world can make a complaint if they feel that, in my case, a Swedish multinational company is not living up to the standards of the OECD guidelines. So I have a lot of cooperation with the different Nordic countries, because we're usually quite like-minded when it comes to sustainability issues. Now, and I think this Nordic cooperation is excellent, and this is also an excellent example of when we work, interact, and exchange best practices. Now, moving on, and I'm hoping that this presentation will, in fact, sometimes it's a bit tricky when it comes to switching. Here we go. And so let me start by talking about trends and movements in sustainable business. So basically, we talk about sustainability or supply chain sustainability. And I think we first have to recognize that there's not a single global definition on what supply chain sustainability is. But in general, I would say it is the decisions a company take to achieve a positive environmental, social, or governmental outcome. But it's also the action companies take to avoid harm in that process. So I will be talking about the sustainability from that angle. And also because we had some really, really interesting studies that were made now in August, well, during the summer, in July, August, but also in September, when it comes to what does Swedish businesses do, how do they work with sustainability, and what do they think about it. And so in the main part, if you see the main trends, we do see a shift from focus on cost to focus on competitiveness and values. And this is a shift that's been going on for quite some time. So this is really nothing new. We also see that climate change is still top of the agenda when it comes to sustainability issues. And I'm sure it mirrors a lot of the sustainability decisions made by all Nordic companies and Nordic Baltic companies. And that climate change is really on top of the agenda. But it is closely followed by social issues and transparency. So the gap is not that great. The other trend that we see is increased regulation. And in a Nordic-Baltic format, it's either coming from the European Union or, as in the case of Norway, in form of national legislation. But whichever way it comes, we do see that there is a trend when it comes to increased regulation that is targeted towards sustainability in the supply chains. And I know that you will have a session on this right after, so I won't go into depth, but I will mention it. Now, what are the sustainability trends for Swedish businesses? Well, first, this is basically based on two studies that were made quite recently. One was made by the Swedish local UN Global Compact Network, and it asked 900 businesses, large and small, how they were working with sustainability, both in their own operations, with their subsidiaries, and in their value chains. And it's also, we have another study that I will also refer to, which is made by our export financing agencies, where they asked 201 exporting companies of a certain size how they were working with sustainability, both receiving and demanding or requiring when it comes to sustainability requirements. So what are the trends? Well, the first trend is that sustainability is seen as an integral part of the business model, its vision and values. So when they ask the companies why, why do you work with sustainability? The first, or the answer that most companies gave was that it's because it is part of our vision and our values. For number two, it's because we need to stay competitive. And I think you probably heard this before, that sustainability is a way to stay competitive. We want to be competitive in the future. And if we are going to be so, we also need to be sustainable. Reason number three was that it is because we want to attract and retain talent. Because we know that talented people today want to work for sustainable businesses. They want to work to make work with companies that have sustainable goals and visions. And only in fourth place came, we do it because there are rules and regulations. So basically the sustainability work of a lot of companies today, Nordic, Baltic, in the case Swedish, has a lot more to do with the values and the identity of the company rather than it's being pushed by the regulatory agenda. And I think that's quite interesting. And when asked, how actively do you work to strengthen sustainability in your operations, your subsidiaries, and in your value chains? 60% say we work very actively. But over 90% said we work very actively or partly actively. So whatever you put in those words, you can say that at least that over 90% of the companies that were asked work actively in one way or another with sustainability in their business. We also see that exporting companies have sustainability requirements for their suppliers, and I will get back to that a little bit later. And not surprisingly for most of you, we see that larger companies have a more active and more ambitious work than smaller companies, and that's usually due to resources and maybe to leverage when it comes to how you can work with sustainability. Now, that was the whys. So now here is the how. How do the businesses work with sustainability in Sweden and abroad? And over 90% responded that they have integrated sustainability in their business strategy and their vision. And almost as many have sustainability at the center when they're developing new strategies or business models. So it's either part of the existing or it's part of their future. 80%, of course, use it in communication and reporting, and over 80% also see it as an integral part of their value chain and buying processes. So you see that most companies who work with sustainability are not just doing it in their own operations, but they're actually extending it out into their value chains. But they also do it in relation to developing new products and services, because, and that of course has to do with the competitiveness aspect, that if you have sustainable products and services, hopefully there will be a greater demand and you will be able to market them better. Now, we've talked about the why, we talked about the how, and now is the question of the what. what sustainability issues are most important for Swedish companies today. And we see that over 90% work with sustainability issues that are connected to the environment, and that includes climate change. But we also see that almost as many work with it when it comes to labor issues. And 2/3, a bit less, work actively when it comes to anti-corruption and compliance. And about half work with human rights. So here we have a slight difference when it comes to topics and themes that businesses are working with. And when talking about exporting companies, and this is a study that was made in June, I think 2022, and 201 exporting companies were replied to a survey made by one of our exporting financing agencies. And as you can see, in this case, 80% or 8 out of 10 companies have sustainability requirements for their suppliers in most of the sustainability areas, be it environment, human rights, labor conditions, or anti-corruption. If you divide this with between larger and smaller companies, you get a slight variation, because you see that for larger companies, 9 out of 10 had these requirements, and for smaller companies, it was 6 to 7 out of 10. So that became the medium. The happy medium was 8 out of 10. But even here, we could see that there was a difference between larger and smaller companies when it comes to sustainability requirements. The interesting part is that when it comes to downstream requirements, that means having requirements towards your clients or customers. About 60% of the exporting companies also had requirements no, sorry, I'm lying. It's about a third, about 30% have downstream requirements when it comes to clients and customers. And you may think, what does that mean? Well, in environment and climate, it can have to do with waste management. Connection to human rights can be, for example, in telecommunications when it comes to surveillance, etc. So about a third work downstream, but almost 80% work upstream towards their suppliers. And about 60% of the exporting companies also said that they get sustainability requirements from their buyers. So when they're suppliers, they also get sustainability requirements. And that is something that is increasing. So of course, here you see one of the keys to the high level of sustainability work, because Sweden is an exporting country and an exporting market. So we get, our exporting companies have these requirements, but they're also being asked by their clients to disclose their own sustainability work. Now, and I know that you're going to talk about this in the next session, but one of the big game changers that we see right now is, of course, the regulatory push at the European level. So when we see to the policy system, and this is not only on an EU level, but we see that there is a regulatory push on a global level. And there is, you can see, it's a sort of a policy ecosystem that is growing at the moment. So starting and having the European level more as an example of the different kind of policy initiatives that can come when it comes to sustainable supply chain management. You see, for example, that we have the EU Green Deal, which is sort of the overarching policy initiative that then gives the impetus to all these other kinds of regulatory initiatives that are coming. And I think the first one, which you will probably talk about later, is the proposed EU legislation on a mandatory due diligence for human rights and environment, called the EU CS3D, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. And it's a classic example of where we're now moving from voluntary guidelines, such as the UN Guiding Principles and the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, towards a more mandatory system. We also see that, for example, in the Norwegian legislation on the Transparency Act. So that's one, and that is also comes alongside different kind of disclosure or reporting requirements, which are also being mandatory. And this is, of course, the more general kind of due diligence obligation, but we also see due diligence obligations in different sectoral regulations, such as the battery or deforestation regulation. So the movement from voluntary to mandatory is one of those policy development that we see. But we also see another part of the policy ecosystem, which is connected to the framework where we do our exporting and importing and we trade. And that is, of course, the trade and investment policy. And the trade and investment policy is really important to ensure regulatory coherence, because that is going to be one of the keys for businesses when there is an increased obligation when it comes to how you work with different sustainability issues in your value chain. You also need as much regulatory coherence as possible, preferably on a global scale, so that it's easier for business to fulfill those requirements. Because otherwise you will look at, you can look at hundreds of different requirements. So trade and investment policy, very important, not just to ensure that sustainability is part of that agenda, but also for regulatory coherence. And then we have the issue of different types of market access restrictions. So market access restrictions is actually nothing new. I mean, we've had that for a long time. I think the earliest market access restriction legislation came in the early 1900s. And they have traditionally been about forced labor, child labor. So you can't import products or have products connected to child labor or forced labor in some countries. They've also been connected to biodiversity, the trade in rare plants and animals, for example. So these are not, this is really nothing new. But we do see that there are quite a lot of them coming out right now. And we see the new thing here, I would say, is that we are getting market access restrictions connected to climate change. And we haven't had that before. That's quite new. But another example of that, of course, is the quite recently published initiative on a ban on products made by forced labor in the EU, which is also a unilateral market restriction regulation. See if we can move to the next slide. So looking ahead, and I'm closing in now, is where are we when it comes to sustainability and the sustainability trends? We have sort of the challenge agenda, which is the post-COVID agenda, which show that resilience in global value chains is really key. But we also see that there have been weakenings of democratic institutions in many countries due to COVID restrictions. We've also seen an increase in corruption, and of course an increase in poverty levels in many countries, which will pose a more challenging market. We've also seen a lot of geopolitical factors, conflicts, the politicization of sustainable business, which makes it a more complicated pattern or a more complicated way to actually be able to work with sustainability in your entire value chain when it comes to businesses. But on the good side, we also see a great deal of engagement from private sector. And it's not just large businesses may lead, but small businesses are also working actively with this. And we see this mainly, I would say, in climate change. So I think that we are looking at a very interesting couple of years ahead, where we are looking at the increase of regulatory or different policy instruments, but we also see a very, very strong commitment and work in the private sector. And in many ways, the private sector is ahead of the curve and ahead of the government when it comes to working, I would say, especially related to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. We have a couple questions. I remind everybody that you can write question in slido.com and write person who want to ask a question. And Cecilia, firstly, thank you very much for the speech. And we have one question in Slido platform. So, how does government of Sweden correct of greenwashing in the numbers when the data based on companies self-report?
Well, that is a very good question. I'm not an expert when it comes to sustainability reporting. I know that we do have the non-financial reporting directive, which is now going to be updated, of course, into the EU corporate sustainability reporting directive, and in that you will have standards. So that is one part. But then, of course, a lot of companies are using the climate, different climate frameworks for reporting, such as the TSFD and IFC and others.
Thank you very much. We have time, so I have one question, personal question. Which achievement of Sweden is most satisfying for you? Because your achievement looking from like Lithuanian sides is really great numbers. So from your opinion.
Well, I think it is the fact that I mean, this is not government, this is the private sector who is really leading and being very ambitious when it comes to sustainability and working with it in a very systematic way. So I think that is a great strength, and has also led to the fact that some Swedish companies have been able to be really ahead of the curve when it comes to talking, with fossil-free steel or when it comes to battery production, etc. So I think that is a great strength for us.
Okay, thank you very much, Cecilia, from your presentation and answers in the questions. So, Audrona?
Yes, so we're looking for the other speaker. Thanks, Cecil. And while listening to Swedish presentation, I was really impressed. 8 of 10 companies who are really doing sustainability, who are really reporting, who are measuring impacts and developing strategies. While last year, Lava did a small research, and we have the data that only 1/5 of the companies are reporting, and it's only 30% tells about their strategies. So we have a lot of work. And another aspect which came to my mind listening to Cecile was that in many seminars when we were talking with companies about sustainability, one of the main questions was like, what is the fee? How shall I be punished if I will not be sustainable? So Vitalija Impolevičienė, attorney at law and co-head of ESG service, Sorainen, EU legal framework for sustainability. So how shall we be punished for that, if we?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the organizers of this wonderful event. It is really fantastic to have this event here in IKEA Industry, a company that pays so much attention to sustainability issues. We need to admit, however, that many companies are still used to thinking about sustainability as about something nice to have. Some volunteering with their colleagues, some donations, maybe stop using disposable cups in the office. And then suddenly your investor or your partner comes and asks, do you have a sustainability policy in place? Do you have a framework to track and to measure your goals and to report? Why is that? What happened? So I will talk on EU legal framework in the field of sustainable finance and corporate sustainability, and how this framework, applicable only for certain companies, will affect every business, even the business that is technically not in scope of those regulations. To start with, I would like to introduce a couple of concepts that are generally acknowledged in the field of sustainable finance. And first concept, excuse me. And first concept, normative principle, is the principle of integration, which requires that when taking the decisions regarding development, due consideration should be taken into account regarding environmental issues. Second, the principle of equity. That is, first of all, intergenerational equity, requiring justice and equity between the generations. If we have possibility to drink clean water, our grandchildren also should have this possibility, and as well intragenerational equity. If we have possibility to drink this clean water, the communities and societies in the global south should have that possibility too. Also, it is worth mentioning the principle, the precautionary principle. This principle states that even if there is no strong incontrovertible scientific evidence that certain activities may have environmentally harmful effects, it is better to control that activity now rather than to wait until incontrovertible scientific evidence appears. Lastly, I would like to mention the concept of sensitive intervention points. And these are critical thresholds in various systems, also in the legal systems, in social systems, and once crossed, the rate of systematic change can be exponential. Now, having those principles in mind, let us talk about the EU legislation. As already mentioned by a previous speaker, European climate law is an overarching framework document which establishes a goal for achieving climate neutrality within the EU by 2050. So it does not establish binding requirements for the companies. It establishes a requirement for EU institutions and member states to adopt a regulatory framework enabling the achievement of the climate targets. Overall, EU legislation includes a wide range of measures from eco-labeling to waste management, but I will talk more about EU sustainable finance package that is aiming to channel private investments towards the transition to climate neutral economy. This EU sustainable finance package is a good example of the sensitive intervention point. When the regulation imposed on financial sector and on big corporates further facilitates the changes even at a non-regulated business level. Now, Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation was introduced to improve transparency in the market of financial products and to prevent greenwashing. It applies to financial market participants such as asset managers, banks, pension funds, life insurers, basically all entities offering financial products where they manage clients' money. And it imposes comprehensive sustainability disclosure requirements covering environmental and social metrics at both entity level and product level. If the financial market participant markets its product as green, it should explain in a standardized manner how green it is and why. Also, it should disclose information at an entity level if it takes into consideration the sustainability risks while taking investment decisions. Now, if the regulator aims to direct investments towards sustainable projects and activities, and if financial market participants are required to disclose sustainability-related information, then the question arises, what is sustainable and what is not? And here comes the EU taxonomy, which is basically a classification system establishing a list of environmentally sustainable activities. The taxonomy regulation establishes 6 environmental goals, objectives, and for an economic activity to qualify as environmentally sustainable, it must, first of all, make a substantial contribution to at least one of those goals. Then it must do not significantly harm to the other 5 objectives, and it must meet minimum social safeguards. There are comprehensive technical screening criteria that help to identify if these requirements are met. Moreover, the taxonomy is not only classification system. Certain companies in scope must report on their share or proportion of taxonomy-aligned activities in their turnover and in their capital expenditure. Further, also as mentioned, so-called non-financial reporting directive that is currently in force lays down the rules for disclosure of non-financial and diversity information for certain large companies. It is counted that currently approximately 12,000 of EU large companies and groups are in scope, including listed companies, banks, insurance companies, and other companies designated by national authorities. The companies in scope must publish information related to environmental matters, social matters, treatment of employees, respect of human rights, anti-corruption, anti-bribery, diversity on company boards. Now the political agreement is reached regarding Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which is set to adopt later this year and to amend the previously applicable non-financial reporting directive. So, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive will extend the scope of the companies that must comply. It will require the audit of the reported information. It will also introduce more detailed reporting requirements, and it is expected that companies will have to submit their reports aligning with the CSRD in 2024 for the financial year 2023. Now coming to the supply chain issues, of course we understand that companies are expected to monitor and optimize their performance in relation to such issues like child labor, exploitation of workers, safe and healthy working conditions, biodiversity loss, and so on. And the upcoming legislation will make supply chain traceability and social risk management even more important. And the notable example of such initiative is the proposal for Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Now, this proposal basically does two things. First of all, it establishes corporate due diligence duty. The companies in scope will have to conduct human rights and environmental due diligence of their own operations, of their subsidiaries, and also in the value chains. Another thing, this directive also introduces duties for the directors of the companies covered. The directors will have duty to set up and oversee this due diligence process, to integrate that into the corporate strategy. And when fulfilling their duty to act in the best interest of the company, they must take into account the human rights, the environmental consequences of their decision, and climate change issues. Notably, even existing legal framework, for example, in Lithuania, requires that the directors act in the best interests of the company, and we just are not used to thinking about environmental considerations from this angle. We kind of used that, for example, directors must take measures to protect personal data of the customers. That is already normal, but I think that it's only a matter of time when the also, this duty to take care of environmental and human rights issues will be tested in the courts or in the disputes also in our jurisdiction. So, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive will be applicable for large EU companies and also for certain large non-EU companies having significant turnover in the European Union. SMEs technically are not in the scope, but they could be indirectly affected. So, as I like to say, ESG framework is not something that a company can do overnight. Therefore, already now, having in mind the upcoming regulations, the companies should start thinking whether they are in scope or not of the new regulation. And even if not, every company should think that it may be and it will be in the value chain where the companies that are in scope also participate. Therefore, it might be beneficial for every business already now to conduct risk analysis of existing operations and value chains, to identify the areas which could have adverse effects to human rights, to the environment. Also, companies may choose to discuss these matters with their business partners and to consider future obligations, maybe when entering into new contracts or amending existing contracts with their partners, to understand what obligations, what duties may come. And to sum it up, banks, investors, listed entities, big corporates, others that are subject to sustainable finance and non-financial reporting requirements. And therefore, they are more and more selective and demanding towards the companies within their portfolios and in their supply chains. And to sum it up, ESG topics should appear on every board agenda and every manager's agenda, even if the business is technically not in scope of the upcoming regulations.
Thanks, Vitalia. I think we've heard definitely that every company in the production, in downstream, upstream supply chain will be affected. And I have actually one provocative question, since audience doesn't ask anything. Well, if we say that sustainable company, it's the company who integrates sustainability in DNR, in a core business. While ESG, it's just about complying with certain rules. How do you think, how many companies will take the opportunity and try to change the essence of the business, and how many companies would just, comply with ESG?
I will answer as a lawyer, Of course, definitely, important part of a good ESG framework is employee training, and the sustainability considerations should be embedded into the business operations. On the other hand, this is not something that should be left for the marketing people or HR people, with all respect to them. Because if you deal with your partner in the supply chain, or if you deal with a financier or the investor, then you also need to be able to demonstrate that ESG framework in place. So as a lawyer, I would say that having a proper documented framework is equally important. And even more important, as I mentioned, is to include these questions into the board agenda.
Yes, indeed. But how to introduce those issues to board agenda? Do you think EU legal framework will now really change the attitude? Because from what I hear, the management boards are a little bit reluctant to sustainability, and they say, okay, economy first.
Yes, and this is understandable from business perspective. Although, I think that when a certain project or certain contract will lie on the table with questions asked in relation to sustainability, that will be best incentive for the board also to take those issues seriously. That is why I mentioned those sensitive intervention points in the beginning. It was good to hear previous speaker Cecile talking about Swedish companies, that they are not incentivized by regulatory push, but more by the values. That is fantastic, that is desirable, but the access to finance, access to supply and production chain also is a perfect incentive.
Thank you very much. Thank you then, Natalia, and it's my pleasure to announce that our first part is over. I would encourage the audience online also to ask questions on Slido. We have a coffee break from 2 o'clock to 20 past 2, so 20 minutes coffee break. And then we will talk about business cases. Coffee break.
Welcome back. Welcome back once again in 9th Nordic Sustainable Baltic Summit. Welcome back here in IKEA factory. Welcome back from another side of the screen. And I didn't wait anything. And once again, ask on the stage IKEA Industry Lietuva Director Inga Urbonavičiūtė. Please.
Thank you. Hello again to all. And today we will speak about sustainable raw materials. We will not speak mainly about production. We will speak about raw materials. As all supply chains, in fact, starts from raw materials. And I personally have a passion in different supply chains. I spent a lot of years in my life in different supply chains. So I promise leaving some space at the end of presentation to ask different practical questions. So, but before starting speaking about raw materials, I want to say a couple of words about what does it mean sustainability in IKEA, and why sustainability is in the core of each activity of us. So first, to start with, 4 years ago, IKEA published sustainability strategy. I believe not every company, even big company, has the separate strategy for sustainability. It shows how big stress we put under sustainability. But even more, internally we don't call that strategy sustainability strategy. We call it people and planet positive strategy. And in fact, this people and planet covers everything what we do in our activities. We always try to make our furniture affordable for many people. At the same time, we take care about making positive impact to people first, and then to our, meaning this people angle of sustainability, as well as to be planet positive, environmental angle. It starts with sustainability strategy. We have also sustainability plan consisting of many chapters covering different aspects of our activity. But today I will not speak about all chapters. It would take all day. But we'll focus on raw materials part. What goals we have in our plan for raw materials. And those goals are truly ambitious. We expect that we set a goal that till year 2030, 100% of our products will be circular. And all materials used in production will be renewable or recyclable. Sounds ambitious. We still have 8 years to go. But today I will speak what we do in that direction. What projects we run in our factory. And first, let's start what is the raw materials for us. If I would ask all of you what is the main raw materials for furniture, most likely you would name solid wood, plastics, maybe glass, mirrors, metal pieces. But in fact, the main raw material for furniture production is particle board. Those who are here, you can see examples of particle board. You can touch, you can smell it. But let's go one level down. What are the raw materials for particle board production? And particle board mainly consists of wood material and resin. Not a big surprise. Let's go one more level down. Wood materials. As you see in this chart, almost 50% of wood comes to our factory as a virgin wood, as logs from the forest. 40%, around 40%, comes as residuals from furniture or any other wood processing industries. It can be chips, it can be sawdust, it can be offcuts, and only around 10-12% in our days is recycled wood. Naturally, you can ask question why. Having our current equipment, we can use only very clean recycled wood without any impurities, plastics, metals, and similar. How to increase that share? We have a project which is just in very beginning, and we are planning to build recycling line. Recycling line, the purpose of recycling line is to clean wood for all those, from all those impurities. I believe you can say this is not an innovation, because today I am ready to speak about innovations, how raw materials lead to different innovations. No, technically it is not an innovation. But such lines exist in Europe. But it would be very much supply chain innovation in Lithuania, because we don't have such supply chain. How to collect recycled wood, how to bring to, how to sort, and we are very much realistic. In the beginning, we will not get all needed recycled wood in Lithuania. So we need to build supply chain again. We need to find the right mode to deliver. Would it be vessel or railway with certain reloading points? So very much challenging, very much interesting project in which we are involved in nowadays. But equally important also is to speak about the glue or resin, which is used for gluing that glue and converting the raw material as wood into particle board. Usually in particle board production, the glue which is used is made from fossil fuels, in particular from natural gas. It contains certain amount of formaldehyde. And what we have started, we started it in pandemic time, almost 2 years ago. We started to develop the new technology and to use bio-based glue. So here really innovation comes, because such technology doesn't exist in the world. I will not speak a lot about it. You, in general, you are the first who listen about that. We'll communicate much more in the beginning of next year, but now we are progressing already. We can produce, we can, and the main purpose is that that type of boards should have absolutely the same mechanical properties as the boards glued with conventional glue. This is a big task, a lot of efforts, and very interesting time for us. And my summary slide is more about our learnings, how to drive innovations. We use such term in our factory, bread and butter. Our bread in our days, we need to produce products, we need to deliver them to customers on time in a good quality. And at the same time, we have to drive innovations. How to do it with having just one organization in the factory, how to balance human resources in it. And this is our learnings. What helps really? Tolerance to mistakes, but intolerance to incompetence. We need to encourage people to experiment, But at the same time, equally important is to keep strict discipline and to know very clear what you do and why you do and when you do. Diverse teams, we speak a lot about that, but only diverse teams works well in innovations. But having diverse teams, you need to work on inclusion a lot. Each voice should be listened, that sometimes the most strange ideas are the most true ideas. Collaboration between departments is a key, but collaboration should be balanced with individual responsibility. And flat organizational structure. I have got compliments from some of you saying that people feel, they see that co-workers in the factory are relaxed, they keen to speak. Yeah, we have really flat organizational structures. And direct leadership will never work. Will never work in terms of innovation. You need to apply very much coaching leadership style. So this is our learnings, our summary, and now maybe you have some questions.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much once again, because we who are here can not just listen, but today we have excursion for our factory, and we see it was amazing and surprising, and really glad to be here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks once again. But we the first who can see the innovation of you, who will be present the next year, and I have a couple questions in Slido platform. We didn't have any question to you, but I have a couple of questions from my side. First of all, I will want to ask how or did war in Ukraine change your supply chain? Because we hear that before you use material from, how can I say, not friendly countries. So.
I cannot complain that it changed a lot. We had not direct relations with Ukraine. Anyway, our business was raw material business was those so-called not friendly countries were declining due to economical reasons. So we cannot complain a lot. But what challenge it brought for us, in fact, not for us, but for our suppliers. For instance, glue supplier had also relations with not friendly countries, and they needed to prioritize supply and produce glue on time. So we had an impact, but it was more indirect impact on us.
Thank you. And one question you mentioned about the changing what you did, and say that you need a lot of efforts. But I would like to, if you can, specify what kind of resource, human resource, money, etc., needed to make that change. What you did.
What kind of change?
I've changed to new product to you know, your goal 2030. All raw material, use just all raw material. So I think for the it was interesting to hear what it need to make this change.
I think first we need human brains to make it happen. Other resources goes after. So first we need to know clearly what we want to do, how, and then to structure it and to do it step by step.
Okay, thank you very much, Inga. So thank you for your presentation.
And we should continue. And I presume we have saved some CO2 because now we're having speaker online. Hi, Juha. We have Juha Erkilä, Vice President of Outokumpu. It's a Finnish company. And Juha Erkilä is a Vice President for Sustainability, Excellence and Reliability. Juha, group sustainability excellence and reliability. How does it work in metal industry?
Yeah, hello everyone, and pleasure to be here, at least online. Well, at least I managed to save some CO2 by not traveling, but this was unfortunately due to other business reasons that I couldn't come over there on site. But it's really a pleasure to be here nevertheless, and I really got a lot of connection points from Inga's speech there earlier on about the recycled materials and the meaning of sustainable raw materials, and I really want to continue that journey. So let me just take up my presentation here, and let's see, let's hope all the technology supports us as well. Okay, so hopefully you can see it now, and this picture right here is from our stainless steel factory from Tornio in Finland, which is my hometown as well. It's right adjacent to the Swedish border, and you see the people ice fishing over there, you know, of course, giving a good indication of that we still have very decent winters in the up north of Finland, but also the fact that we have such an, you know, environmentally stable steel mill that it's more than okay to fish right next to it and eat the fish. But without further ado, shortly about Outokumpu. First of all, the name of the company might sound peculiar, but it's actually a word in Finnish and means a strange hill. And that's a linkage to our heritage in mining. So Outokumpu was established originally 110 years ago, roughly speaking, and it came about from a strange looking hill in the eastern part of Finland that was filled with copper, and Outokumpu got involved into copper mining, extracting copper and electrifying the entire Finland. So all the electricity grids that were built back in the day would have been done out of Outokumpu's copper. But that history has been sort of shifted away, and nowadays Outokumpu is only a stainless steel producer with a very global presence. We also have our global business center located in Vilnius in Lithuania, but the steel production sites are located in Finland, Sweden, UK, and the USA. Then we have some following processing facilities in other countries as well. And stainless steel as a material is, of course, a material that is made to last. So it's not like you would produce your everyday knickknacks and utilities out of stainless steels, but it's really for heavy-duty purpose usages and for very, very long lifetimes. And of course, at the end of its life, all the stainless steel equipment can be recycled again and 100% recycled. And if we look at Outokumpu as a group, as an ingredient for the raw material, for the stainless steel that we produce, more than 90% is actually recycled old pots and pans and cars and bikes and you name it, that we are then converting into new fresh stainless steel that can then become, for instance, IKEA pots and pans or furniture holsters and so forth. So our business model is entirely based on circular economy. As a company, our sustainability targets are always defined by the means of a materiality analysis. And what that means is that we are basically asking the questions from our most important stakeholders, so the customers, the suppliers, the communities that we are in, the NGOs, and the investors and the like, that what are the elements that our focus should really be, and what is the business impact for Outokumpu's own businesses. And last year, when we did the latest materiality analysis update, it was extremely clear that the focus of our effort should be mostly in emissions and footprint reduction. And this is now linked to carbon dioxide emissions mostly. As if you look at steel industry as a whole, it is responsible of some 8% of the global carbon dioxide emissions globally. So that is a massive chunk. And obviously, there is a lot that needs to be done within the whole industry in order to make the transition towards more cleaner steel production. And as you can imagine, steel is a fundamental element in building societies, infrastructure, and so on. With at least until now, there hasn't been really any challenger that could provide the same kind of means what steel can do for infrastructure manufacturing. And if you look at technically produced materials, concrete is the largest in terms of weight and volume, but steel is following concrete very closely. And globally, there's about 2 billion tons of steel being produced on an annual basis. Outokumpu produces roughly 3 million tons of stainless steels on an annual basis. So very small portion of the whole piece, but nevertheless, we see our role as a very, very important one, given that we are leading the industry with a very, very small carbon footprint, which we have extremely high ambitions to reduce even further. And I also want to point out here that out of the most material topics, it's not only about emissions and footprint reduction, but also about the sustainable supply chain, which was also addressed in the previous presentation quite well. And this does not only mean emissions, this includes the human rights angles and the environmental topics that come with managing global supply chains as well. Then if I look at our existing carbon dioxide footprint, it is effectively steered by the three main pillars that we have. One of them is our own chrome mine. So we do still operate one mine from our previous history. And this is the only chrome mine in the whole European Union. So it's a massively unique asset from a European angle. And why chrome is now of importance? It's because the definition of stainless steel is that it needs to have at least 10.5% of chromium in order to be stainless. So having chrome there as an ingredient is kind of a mandatory in order to make the steel stainless. So then it develops a chrome oxide layer on top of the steel, which then doesn't corrode. So that's the simple element behind it. But since our production is already electrified, so we have electrical steel making only, not any blast furnaces or such, we are very, very dependent on the availability of electricity and the fact that electricity needs to be also with a very, very low carbon footprint. And I'm happy to say that in our entire energy mix, and this is now looking globally, we have more than 80% of the electricity from low carbon sources already last year. So this is a very good achievement. I mean, looking at Finland's national electricity grid mix, that is already on a very low level. But then we have also melt shops, which are the most energy absorbing units. They are also located in, for instance, US and UK, where the situation is not quite the same. So I'm very pleased already with the 80%, but of course we are working on increasing that on a yearly basis. And just to paint you a picture of how important the electricity is for us, only in Tornio in Finland, which I showed you the photo earlier, we use about 3.5 terawatt hours of electricity on an annual basis, and that's roughly 4% of the whole electricity consumption of Finland. So it's not a small amount of electricity. And then the third extremely important element for the carbon footprint is then the fact that we use a high amount of recycled raw materials. And this is now a key piece because, as you will see from my presentation later on, it is actually by far the biggest emission source of our material, the primary raw materials that are coming into the play. So because we are assembling a whole heap of recycled materials, that means that we also need to combine it with small amounts of primary raw materials in order to meet the stainless steel composition that the customer has ordered. So if you take as an example the most typical stainless steel grade, which is the 304 austenitic stainless steel, and that you can actually identify yourself by just taking a magnet and sticking it into your pot, and if it doesn't stick, then it's austenitic stainless steel, and it contains the nickel. So the 304 stainless steel contains 18% of chromium and 8% of nickel. So there is a lot of raw materials that go into producing these type of steels. But of course, on top of the carbon dioxide emissions, we are extremely heavily working on the safety of our own operations, and we've managed now to reach the benchmark level. So we are now leading in the industry with a total recordable rate of 2.0. That's by far the best in our industry when it comes to safety figures, and we've managed to drop it by 70% from 2016. So again, something that we're really proud of. We did sign up for so-called science-based targets in order to establish meaningful climate targets for our company. And as the baseline, we chose the year 2016, and we have been constantly reducing our carbon footprint from that year on. And our aim is to reach 42% reduction by 2030. Now, this is a major reduction that we need to do. And I'm happy to say that we are now the only steel company in the world that has approved 1.5 degree science-based targets approved by the SBTi initiative. So this is kind of our North Star when it comes to the ambition level, and it's very tightly linked to our business targets. So we have, of course, as a business, we do have targets when it comes to profitability and so forth, but we do also have a CO2 target that is exactly on the same level of importance as the normal business metrics. So I think that is really in the essence of sustainability, that it needs to become a meaningful business metric so that you can actually start incorporating it into everyday decision making. Now, okay, we still have carbon dioxide emissions, yes, and we do have a plan on reducing them and have already done so for the past 5 years. And where do we stand then on the global comparison? And this chart, I think, you could also be proud that yes, the situation is good. We have a good footprint when we compare it to the competitors and where most of the stainless steel is coming from, but still it is also kind of a grim image, given that the largest volumes that are being produced and where more and more stainless steel is being produced is in China and Indonesia, where the footprint is roughly 4 to 5 times higher or even higher than that compared to our production. But we still want to ensure that there is a lot of ambition within the industry, and therefore we want to be showing the example and setting the pace in the industry to reduce these emissions even further. And then we took a look earlier this year that if we would reduce our emissions as much as it can possibly be done with the technology that exists today. So we produced a product line called Circle Green with the intent of maximizing the amount of scrap that we can utilize in a heat, and with applying bio-based gases and fuels and bioreductants and so forth. We managed to go down to a level of 0.5 tons of CO2 per ton of steel that was actually delivered to the customer, which is a massive reduction of emissions. And if we would look at only the emissions that are coming from our own processes, so the scope 1 emissions and the scope 2 emissions, which are the emissions that come with the electricity that we use, those combined we reduced by more than 95%. And what was left was still scope 3 emissions, so the raw material related emissions, because whenever you produce steel, you always need, for instance, lime, you need different fluorspar and so forth in order to make a slag for steel making, and you need electrodes which are then wearing out in the process as you're running electricity through them. So what was basically left was the emissions related to those components where you don't have any way of reducing emissions, at least at the time being. So we established now a level that what can be technically met today, and we're now looking at increasing these volumes more and more, and then of course start to work on the remaining 0.5 that's left there, out of which mostly is emissions coming from our raw material suppliers then. And in order to help us in this journey, we saw a need that we need to establish a so-called product carbon footprint modeling tool that will allow us to get, for every single piece of material that we produce, a product carbon footprint, so that our customer becomes aware of, okay, what was the environmental burden or the CO2 burden that came along with the material that they just bought. And this is not only to improve the knowledge within the industry, but it's also to allow companies who have ambitious targets for reducing their emissions from the raw materials that they use, because our material that we produce is the raw material for many who produce something out of steel. And typically, steel is seen as one of the most difficult places where you can reduce those supply chain based emissions. And now we are basically offering our customers a tool of showcasing that and utilizing it in order to meet their own climate targets. Then I promised to go into the nitty-gritty details as to where do we get our emissions from. So first of all, the total carbon footprint of our entire company in the year 2020 was about 4.2 million tons of CO2. And out of that, about 1 million tons was basically emissions that are coming from our own pipes. And if we look at then the scope 1 emission, half of that is basically based on the reductants that we are using when we produce the ferrochrome. That is a primary part of our production. So the primary raw material that is used on top of the massive amount of recycled steel that we are going through. And for that, we have now just announced that we are looking at an investment that would allow us to start producing bio-based reductants ourselves, which would then reduce, of course, the emissions coming from the usage of fossil coke that is actually inherently needed in the production of ferrochrome, because ferrochrome is made out of a chromite mineral that is substantially more stable oxide than iron ore, for instance, which can be reduced by hydrogen, but this is not the case for producing chromite, and that's the reason why we are looking at bio-based alternatives on the coke usage side. And as a side product of the biocoke production, we are looking at producing biomethane, which would then reduce our usage of natural gas that is currently producing roughly 1/3 of our direct emissions. So we have a lot of actions there ongoing to address the scope 1. In the scope 2 side, which is the electricity related emissions, here we have, of course, the benefit of being located in areas which have already very ambitious targets for the electricity grids to decarbonize, but we also have the opportunities of making longer power purchase agreements, invest in our own energy production and so forth in order to reduce the electricity related emissions. But then on the scope 3 side, and now this is an interesting one, because you can see that the amount of emissions coming from nickel is massive. So 55% of the 2.5 million tons of scope 3, so emissions that are happening somewhere else than in our own operations. So the nickel emissions are even higher than our entire operations globally. So this is really a problem, and that's what we are now addressing with by selecting suppliers of nickel who have a very small carbon footprint, because the difference is again massive. You have producers who make roughly 2 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel, and that's, let's say, the best available in the world. And then you have the worst ones, which are 200 tons of CO2 per ton of nickel. So we're talking about 100-time difference between different suppliers. And this is now a very interesting part. And if that's also the reason why I named my presentation as the full scope of stainless steel, because we need to look at all emission sources that are really coming into the end product. Because at the moment, that is not the case. We are the only steel company or only stainless steel company who reports on all of these scopes. So there is still plenty of knowledge building that is necessary in order for everyone to look at the full scope of emissions. And of course, the one major mean of reducing the scope 3 related emissions is to increase our recycled share even further. So our record year has now been 2020, when we reached a level of 92.5%. So we are looking at increasing that on a steady basis in order to reduce the scope 3 as much as it simply is possible. Now, because the raw materials are playing such a huge role, and we also saw it in our materiality analysis as being one of the key levers in our sustainability journey, we have established a supplier sustainability team in our raw material procurement, who is doing auditing and incident follow-ups on all of the producers who are located in risk areas, but also in areas that we have identified of high importance. And we are doing individual supplier ranking and scorecards in order to ensure that we have a sustainable supply chain in place. And here we have partnered up with the EcoVadis in order to assess our suppliers. And we have also partnered up with a Swedish company called Enact in order to do social audits on these sites in order to ensure that there is no human rights incidents in place, and that we are doing proper human rights due diligence on our raw material suppliers. And here we have kicked off with doing, of course, the so-called human rights risk assessment that is required from the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And now we are in the process of implementing these measures into our normal risk management process. And those measures are being carried out during this year, and it has come as a normal business practice for us going forward as well. And to conclude, just showing some of the credentials that our sustainability work has gotten from the external platforms. So for instance, the EcoVadis has rated us as a platinum level supplier of steel, which is a quite nice recognition, given that we are now in the top 1% of all the steel companies globally. And EcoVadis has a very large base that they are using. It's more than 80,000 companies that is being assessed by EcoVadis on an annual basis. So it gives some credibility on the actions that we have in our usage. And this year we are now doing a certification of our European operations based on the responsible steel standard that was quite newly developed only a few years ago. It was done together with NGOs and different stakeholders of the steel industry, mostly steel users who want to establish certain criteria for what makes a responsible steel. And the intention of this standard is to grow it into something similar like in the forest industry is known the FSC and PEFC standards and the like. So with that, I hope I didn't break the schedule too badly, and maybe we could have time for a few questions.
Thank you very much, Juha. Since we're slightly behind our agenda, there is actually one short question from the audience. Where you are sourcing such high volumes of recycled content?
Most of our recycled material is coming from the areas where we operate in. So if we look at our European melt shops, so in Finland and in Sweden, most of it is coming from continental Europe. Then, of course, in our American melt shop, it's the North American scrap market that is where the scrap is coming from. So if you look at stainless steel, typically it has very long lifespans. And since stainless steel has been produced for a long time in Europe, there is a lot of scrap available in the market. So the European steel industry can be self-sufficient on the scrap. And we use about 2.6 million tons of steel scrap on an annual basis.
Yeah, that's a lot. I think it's really important for such a hard industry to be green and to be sustainable. And actually, just a short comment, maybe you could say something about the geopolitical situation, because, well, the raw material for stainless steel production was coming also from Russia, from Ukraine. Did it make any impact on your business?
Yes, the war in Ukraine, of course, had some impacts in the business, not in the way of our sales. We have also historically sold very little to Russia, so that on the sales side it didn't change that much. But then now there is nothing going on over there, of course. For the energy mix, it did play a role because there was a quite a significant stream of electricity coming from Russia to the Finnish national grid. So that, of course, changed the energy structure a little bit, which is now seen as high electricity prices and so on. And then we had to look for alternative solutions on certain materials that would have come from Russia, as an example. But there is luckily also alternatives available on the market.
Thank you so much for joining Nordic Baltic Sustainability Summit, and hope to see you on the other conference. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
And now I would like to come on the stage Mr. Nicholas Rosenberg-Kerr, Managing Director of Volvo Group Lietuva.
Thank you. That's probably better. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I will present how Volvo Trucks are driving the shift toward sustainable transport. We are, as you probably know, a leading truck manufacturer and has existed since 1927. We have always have our core values. There was quality. I think you know us from safety. Also, since the 60s, we have the value calling environmental care. We aim to walk the talk when it comes to environmental friendly products and sustainability. And we are currently the only truck manufacturer that actually can deliver a full range of Volvo trucks and fully battery electrical trucks in a full range up to 42 tons. By that, we're also the market leader in Europe and North America of electrical trucks. First, I will show you some important figures and facts behind that, and then I will come to later in the presentation how that impact the whole way of working and in our supply chain and how we're purchasing our products, as you already have seen from some of the other presenters. Let's begin with the viewpoint of how the world looks like. We believe that the climate change is one of the most important challenges that we have in our century, and we want to do something about it. Therefore, we have also, as you heard before, committed us to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, and that is basically going to limiting the heating of the globe. It will truly mean a great shift, and I will come back to what it means for our supply chain. If we look at the total greenhouse gases in the world, we have seen a lot of figures today already, but 36 billion ton come in total as greenhouse gases. We have tried to split a little bit out where does it come from to put ourselves in that picture and see what we can do. There are waste, there are forestries, there are agriculture, there are industry in general, there is buildings, and then there is supply of energy, and then there is transport. And 7% of the total comes from road transport, and therefore we can see, and we take that responsibility seriously, that we have to lead the way. We have to take those steps. Our first milestone is that we in 2030 will have 50% of all deliveries shall be new trucks that is fully electric, with an electrical engine. And how much is that? You have to put a little bit in perspective. This year we will deliver 3,000 trucks in Lithuania. Worldwide we are delivering 150,000 trucks. So in 2030 we are planning to deliver 75,000 electrical trucks. So we have quite a road ahead of us and a big challenge for the future. One of the next milestones in 2040, also related to the Paris Agreement, we are planning to deliver 100% of all trucks shall be fossil fuel free. We have of course made a CO2 roadmap from that and to see how we will come to that stage. There are still some years ahead of us to come to there. Volvo trucks have basically 3 parallel roads. We have the battery electric, as I showed you, we have already delivered and we are able to deliver. We have actually delivered since 2019. The last 10 years we have delivered Volvo buses, so we have that experience. The coming years we are focusing on implementing fuel cells on the market, basically so you can drive a hydrogen. And then we also still have to, and we want to, continuously developing the combustion engine. Of course then based on renewable fuels. Because there is no silver bullets. To succeed we have to offer different solutions for different needs and also for different energy supplies. Now those technologies will of course impact our supply chains a lot, and we need to involve a lot of companies, partners, and have a cooperation on another level, as you also have seen some other presenters are working with today. Let's park the truck. Now you have seen our ambitions, and as you see we are ready to deliver our part, the 7% of the total. However, you are probably interested in how are we doing that and how will we do that in the supply chain. We intend to be in the middle of everything, and we have made this ecosystem roadmap to see how the transport sector is influenced to do those steps. To begin with, it's of course logic we will start to look at the vehicle industry. There is one of those very important, they play a very important role here. The last couple of years we have been challenging in deliveries. We have already seen it today. We have been struggled with the COVID, with war, and etc., and need of many different products. A truck actually consists of 2,000 semiconductors, just to mention one part, and you can remember the car industry have suffered for that for some years. This is just one example of how we have worked with our supply chain and speeding it up. And we have actually come very successful out of this period of time. How have we then managed it, you'll probably ask. Yes, we have, of course it's very complex. I'll try to show you here in very short presentation and one slider how we have done it and how we are working. The Volvo Group supply network, we have always worked very close with our suppliers, and that will of course continue and maybe be even more important with all those challenges ahead of us. We have kept, and that is important, monthly meeting with all our suppliers. Then we have also updated and having a supplier portal. So all of us, especially all of them in the supply chain, all of us also in the commercial part that we are part of here in Lithuania, we can monitor what is going on and we can then have a good communication around it and find solution faster. Then we have of course also a task force that can go in and handle specific challenges we have in the supply chain. The last 2 years have shown us that we have a good solution for that. I'm sure that we have learned a lot the last 2 years, and then we are even stronger and standing stronger for the next years ahead of us, where we will have new challenges, as I already have shown you. As an example of a new supply and a new way of supplying, we just saw Outokumpu. Sorry to Outokumpu. This is not your steel because it's not stainless steel, but we have actually last month delivered the first truck for a customer with stainless steel frame in the truck. And the aim with this is that all electrical trucks shall now drive with stainless steel frame from now on. The steel comes from SSAB, a Swedish producer, and it's not stainless steel, but it's based on a hydrogen concept. So by that, with that new concept, they can deliver us stainless, not stainless steel, sorry, steel that is CO2 neutral. If we go to the next player, the policymakers, this is really a coin with two sides. On the one hand, policies can regulate the fields and for more cleaner and productive transport solution, and that we appreciate. We believe the market, we as manufacturers, are the best to find solutions, but great that we have market gets directions of concrete targets. In terms of emissions, EU have already given us some targets. I have mentioned the Paris Agreement, and related to that, the target is for 2025, only in some years, we shall, compared to the base 2019, save 15% CO2. And in 2030, we shall save 30%. And by that, up to 2050, we shall be on zero. As you remember, we are planning to deliver that already in 2040. We also have the responsibility for the policymakers to go in front here. And here we have making a unique cooperation with the other players in the market. We will show the way forward with three main vehicle manufacturers in Europe, Volvo Truck, of course, Daimler Truck, and Charging Group, to install also a network of battery electric charging network. The joint aim is to give all customers confidence that this is really the way forward, but it's also to install and operate 1,700 sites in just 5 years from now. There we need to cooperate, there we need to work with the politicians to make that work. In addition, we have the energy industry. Of course, that is also crucial to have success with that transformation. And here, every region, every market are different. In general, we need to produce much more electricity with green sources. I think that's clear for everyone. We are taking our own steps to integrate part of the energy supply into our operations. Here in Lithuania, we have purchased solar panels, installing that in all our workshops, and then be able to cover electricity for our workshops and offices. But until now, we have already purchased green electricity. That is, of course, going around the whole world for all Volvo sites. And if we look at our own battery assembly plants, here you see clearly the picture that we are producing 100% renewable energy for ourselves. The battery will be remanufactured, they'll be refurbished and also reused. To meet the growing demand of batteries, as you can imagine, that is coming the coming years, Volvo Group has recently decided to establish a large-scale factory inside Sweden. We'll place it very close to where we today are producing the engines. And by that, we are also very close to the sources of zero green gas energy, because Sweden have that, and they are developing that very fast. Obviously, battery technology is very new for us, and it's really a game changer. Therefore, we had to put some new demands to all our suppliers. And I will a little bit shortly show you how we are assessing our suppliers. We have always done that, but with the new way of working, we have to monitor it and look at a little bit more deeply in some areas. We perform, of course, assessments by all our suppliers, and also performing audits to secure that they are working the way we are agreeing. We have some kind of a Volvo Group policies that we need to be followed. We have business ethics, environment, supplier management, health and safety is of course important, but also the sources of material. And here we are coming to a new area. We are working with countries that are having mine industries, and I think you guess, and you all know that not all those countries are working as they should do. So our job is also to teach them how to be able in the future to be able to deliver to us. Also the human rights. By that, we also are playing a role to secure that people around the world, they will get a better life. And I'm sure with our products delivered here in Europe and North America, we can also help other part of the global. To shape the world as we want to live in is the saying we have in Volvo. This is the key enablers for that. Of course, it's about net zero greenhouse emissions. It's also about circular economy. We have already heard about it by IKEA, but also the human rights. And as I already mentioned, we cannot tolerate any mistakes here. We have to demand that all suppliers around the world, they are living up to the standards we think is acceptable. So let's have a look at some of the transport buyers. I'm really proud of standing in this building today because you are actually a big partner of us. I'll come back to that. But if you look at ourselves in Volvo Trucks first, we have 4,000 trucks every day driving around the world, just transporting for our production. We have 200 containers. We have 100 Volvo Group factories and 5,000 suppliers. Our goal is, of course, to reduce also the CO2 emission by all our suppliers driving for us. And there we have set a goal of 30% in 25. That is the double of what EU has set as a regulation. But we have also customers that is helping us in that direction. I'm really happy to stay here and say that Volvo IKEA last month, together with the Raben Group in Poland, have signed an agreement where we together will drive that. IKEA has started up in Poland with electrical trucks and will start up as a product phase to learn from that in those two areas. Of course, this is the start, and then the plan is to develop it out to many countries. And let us agree that the next step that will be here in Lithuania. Another large player is that is planning to decarbonize the transport together with us. That is Amazon. Last month we agreed with Amazon to deliver 20 full electrical trucks in Germany. So you see there are many players. We have Maersk, we have DFDS. There are other big players that have really signed this year big contracts with us. But finally, look at you. Look at the consumers. It's very important that we make it visible financially what is going to happen and what influence will that have with all those changes have. We are certainly in a hurricane when it comes to economy, and we know that the inflation we are in right now is really challenging us here. But as consumers, we have to also take this responsibility. If we look at the consumers, it's important to say how much will it cost for us. And we have from a French retailer of milk, so don't look so much at these prices, just take it as an example. But in France, a milk costs approximately in the shop €2. Let's, for the example, say it costs 2.00 euro. Switching from electric, it has a cost. But the transport, and then the transportation will go up with 5%. The logistic cost of a retailer for the milk is 8%. If you multiply those two figures, then you get 0.4% price increase, meaning we as consumers, we have to pay 1 euro cent more for our milk. The question is, of course, are we ready to do that? Or do we have a choice? I think all of us, also because electrical truck is not only about environmental care, it's also about in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, in the urban area to wake up with a noisy truck delivering to our supermarket or emptying our garbage collecting. It's also about noise, it's about vibration, and also our drivers will have a big advantages of driving in such kind of a truck. It can also attract more drivers. There is actually a need of. So, to finalize it, this is not the first time we are standing in a big change, as you see here on the picture. In the beginning of last century, many big cities stood actually in front of an environmental hazard. At that time, the greatest obstacle for urban development at the turn of this century was the difficulties of removing horse manure from the streets. Don't laugh, but that was the challenge. As you can see on the picture, we actually solved it. At least I did in New York, but this is just a picture, it's generalizing for the whole world. And suddenly all the streets was clean. They look clean. Now we see that we are in another stage of cleanliness, and we need to take the next step to clean the air, to clean the cities for noise, and move the world to the place where we want to live in. So in the end, I'll say thank you for listening in, and good luck with your supply chains transformation. I think we all are going into new, interesting times.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you very much for interesting presentation. And this presentation was interesting not just for me, but also from Slido people, people who make a question in Slido. So due to we just a little bit behind our schedule, I tried to combine several questions. So basic idea is life cycle assessment. People ask about comparing electric car, electric truck and regular truck. Maybe do you have already like numbers how it's changed to emission or for all life cycle assessment, electric and regular truck?
That's a good question. I know there's many critical ideas about going that way of being electric, but the case is that, as I already have said, there is also other advantages than just CO2. But basically, the CO2 is zero on electrical trucks when it drives, and also, as we have shown, that we also planning to produce it CO2 neutral. We have already taken the first steps, and as we also showed that we are building a new battery plant, that of course also will go in that direction. So you could say the production part, we could also neutralize the CO2, but the way the truck is driving and what is coming out of the exhaust pipe, that can only happen with an electrical truck. So I understand the question, and I understand also there are critical voices, but we have to take that step. And also in the production of batteries and in general the production of steel and etc.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Applause.
Thank you.
So let's move to the other sector, from the hard sector to a little bit maybe not that hard. I'm inviting Evaldas Veida. He's finance and business controller at Orkla Kia Baltics. Sustainability in Orkla supply chain.
Thank you, Jone. Good afternoon, everybody, for one more time. I'm Evaldas, I work in Orkla Kia Baltics. And today I'm going to talk a bit about Orkla and sustainability in Orkla supply chain. But first I would like to start with a short introduction about Orkla and actually what the company does, because usually when I tell people for the first time where I work, in Lithuania, and they come back with the question, Orkla, what does it do? What kind of products do they produce or sell or whatever? So yeah, that's the question. So here in the audience, does anybody actually hearing Orkla name for the first time? Maybe if someone doesn't know what kind of products does Orkla produce or sell? by show of hands? No. Nice. Okay. And here goes my plan for interaction with the audience. Okay. So Orkla is a leading branded consumer goods company in Nordic and Baltic regions. And it's quite a big company. I would say we have a bit more than 21,000 employees worldwide. 2021 operating revenues were 49 billion Norwegian kroners, and the company market value at the end of 2021 was 89 billion Norwegian kroners. Strong presence in Nordic region and Baltics, accounting to 70% of all Orkla sales, and the rest 30 coming from mainly Central Europe and India. And Orkla is a proud owner of more than 300 brands in all markets where it operates. And to name just a few, which should be more known in the Baltics, is Estonian chocolate brand Kalev, or Latvian chocolate brand Laima, iconic fish oil Möllers, and Tafel snacks, or Jordan oral care. And Orkla's vision is to be a friend in everyday life, and Orkla's mission is improve everyday life with sustainable and enjoyable local brands. So we have sustainability pinned in our mission, and we actually care about sustainability in Orkla a lot. Sustainability is a part of Orkla culture, and it's a part of our everyday life in operations and everywhere what we do. We measure a lot ourselves, how we are doing and how we are progressing in this area at Orkla, and we report quite extensively how good we are there. And we have then what to tell about sustainability area in Orkla. And to name just a few, that Orkla has achieved a 65% cut in greenhouse gas emissions from own operations in 2021, comparing to 2014, as a base year. And also 47% of energy that Orkla uses comes from renewable sources. And I mentioned that we, report extensively our sustainability progress. So we are rated as one of the world's best listed companies for climate leadership by global nonprofit environmental organization, CDP. We scored A there. So when it comes to packaging, 96% of Orkla's packaging in 2021 was recyclable, and 54% of packaging was wholly or at least partly on recycled materials. So as every business in Orkla, we also have set targets for ourselves so we could be better, so we should aim to be better. And if we are looking into environmental engagement area, some of the targets to mention, for 2025 is Orkla wants to have more than 60% renewable energy in own operations, 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the entire value chain, and a 50% reduction in food waste from our own operations. And 2025 is not the furthest timestamp in the future where we have set targets for ourselves. We have targets for 2030, we have targets for 2040, and we have targets even for 2045. And Orkla has a target to reach zero greenhouse gas emissions across the entire value chain by 2045. And recently, this year in August, I think, these targets have been improved also by science-based targets initiatives. But let's go back now to the supply chain, and let's go down to one business area of Orkla, and that is Orkla Care, which accounts to 15% of all sales in 2021. And I wanted to show you one project which regarding sustainable packaging, which was implemented in one category of this business area is in healthcare category. In Denmark, we have Ishøy factory, which produces a wide range of Orkla health portfolio for food supplements and vitamins. And Ishøy factory in Denmark is actually the biggest food supplements manufacturing facility in Scandinavia. So we had a project regarding sustainable packaging, and you know, the project name was Ishøy Square project. And the idea was that, you know, majority for us as a branded consumer goods company and producer, you know, for us it's important what we produce and what kind of footprint do we leave with our products. So we had to make a change and to switch to more sustainable materials in packaging that we use for food supplements and vitamins. We wanted to take a clear sustainability position in the food supplements category. And of course, complexity was also one of the reasons, because before this Ishøy Square project, there was 29 different jars and boxes, you know, where food supplements and vitamins were packed, you know, which were produced in the Ishøy factory. So we had to change this in order to increase our possibilities for automation in the future and reduce the complexity in our operations and supply chain. So the project was also in line with our sustainable packaging goals that we have in Orkla for 2025. And, you know, due to high complexity, we wanted to develop one new design for the jar for our products, and that could help us reduce complexity. The goal was replace several generic and traditional jars that you know, that was made from medicine glass or plain plastic, all across brands and all across markets that, you know, were produced in the Ishøy factory. And we wanted to have a packaging, a jar that is environmental friendly, that has attractive, unique and functional design, and which could help us also reduce complexity in our operations. And just to have a better idea, you know, the scope of the project was 21 different brands, accounting to around 460 million Norwegian kroners. The yearly volume produced in the factory was 8.1 million packages across 243 different SKUs. And the markets impacted by this project was, you know, Denmark, you know, all Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Baltics, Poland, and export. And it took us 1.5 years from start to finish, from coming up with design until everything was changed, and project was finally implemented at the end of 2020. So we had a full year, 2021, where we could measure and actually calculate what result did this project bring to us. And results were quite nice, I would have to say. Transportation volumes, yearly ones, were down by 30%. The logistics cost concerning the Ishøy factory and the markets involved was down by 19%, and that accounts to something around 240,000 euros per year. We improved efficiency related to fewer changeovers, because we went from 29 different jars to just 6. We went from 29 different label color guides to just 6 as well. And of course, we also improved the efficiency related to end-of-line automatization, with palletizing made available due to this project. So looking at the environmental side of the project and what did it bring. So implementation of it gave a 20% reduction in CO2 emissions, which is 50 tons of CO2 per year. And if we convert it in something simple, so yeah, that's like would be driving a car around the earth for 105 times. The glass consumption and plastic consumption after the project was down by 43%. And I think that projects like this, and especially this project, it demonstrates how sustainability can be profitable and contribute to increased efficiency. While reducing complexity, the project did not only contribute to cost savings, but it also laid foundation for a long-term financial results and also increased competitiveness. And of course that we will not just finish with this one. We already have ideas and plans for the future when it comes to our vitamins and food supplements, and we already introduced paper-based pouches. We are in trial modes with paper-based packaging for liquid food supplements. Paper blisters will be introduced in the near future, and by 2025 we hope to have paper-based jars and refills for our beloved products in Orkla. And if we take current geopolitical context, we have war in Ukraine, we have energy crisis across Europe, sanctions are imposed to buy raw materials from some countries. And if we take glass packaging as an example, there's always been a demand for glass packaging, but now with current situation, it's not volumes, that maybe were available in Ukraine or in Belarus or in Russia are not available. So we have a lack of supply in Europe due to capacity. And we also have quite significant price increases for glass packaging as well. And thanks to Ishoi Square project, when it comes to food supplements and vitamins, which we are producing in Ishoi factory, so we have one less problem to think about during these times. So I would just like to finish off that I think that every sustainable solution and initiative decreases business exposure to risk and leaves a smaller footprint to the environment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Evaldas. I think it's really important to sustainability in packaging. I think it's a huge issue. I'm just curious, do you do something for your suppliers? Do you cooperate with them? Do you train them in sustainability?
Well, again, this question, I think, I'm not coming from procurement.
Okay. Well,
so
sorry.
not a bit my garden to properly answer on that.
Yeah.
But actually, Orkla has requirements regarding sustainability for all the suppliers across the value chain.
Well, the reason for the question, because I know that sustainable packaging solutions cost a lot, and cooperation among suppliers, it's really essential. Well, then, talking about supply chain, what's your biggest learning experience in your sustainability journey?
Well, for me personally, I think I was really amazed, inspired when I think of people who come up with such innovative ideas or such innovative solutions for the supply chain, for the operations, when you reduce something or reuse something in the production lines, or come up with materials that you can use fewer, and at the end of the day, that's always a benefit for the business and also a smaller footprint for the environment. So I was, yeah.
Thank you very much, and wishing you successful journey in sustainability. Good luck. Thank you. So it's time to the last part of our summit, and we call it conversation. And we called it conversation in the beginning. Officially, it's a panel discussion, and I would like to invite Vaida Urbaitė from Ekornes, Ieva Randytė from Kvapų namai, Laura Duksaitė from Masterclass Lietuva, and Giedrė Padaigienė from National Coordination Point, Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises. We're very sorry that Liudvikas Taleliūnas from Rimi was not able to have a trip because of the health issues, but I think four of us, we will talk.
So very glad to see here, and I will start with a question, and very simple question. How you are related with sustainable supply and change? So shortly introduce yourself. Audronė already did that, but audience who watching live, so it was very interesting to hear you. So probably we can start from Vaida.
Hello, everybody. My name is Vaida, and I am from Ekornes. For those who don't know, Ekornes is a Norwegian, one of the largest furniture producer. And personally, I am working in Ekornes, Lithuania. The factory actually yesterday celebrated the 5th birthday, so I'm working there for nearly 3 years, and my daily routine is to work with products compliance with legal requirements, with quality standards and ethical norms, such as sustainability.
Thank you, Vaida. So, Ieva.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me today here. I am the CEO of Lithuanian company Kvapų namai. So we specialize in aromatherapy, and we also manufacture natural skincare and natural cosmetics. So we have been trying to be sustainable since day one, and we have practices in line. So I think we will introduce that a little bit later.
Thank you for your introduction. And Giedrė.
Hello, everybody. I have honor to represent National Contact Point, Lithuania National Contact Point for OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. You have heard this keyword today a few times. So we are a group of experts who have duty and honor to help companies to implement this international, probably the most known international standard for responsible business in Lithuania. We also act as mediation and discussion forum for companies who face some claims or allegations for some problems in their supply chains or in their daily lives related to responsible business.
Thank you. And last but not least, Laura.
Thank you very much. I'm representing executive search company Masterclass Lithuania, and we are helping our client to hire the best supply chain managers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we really have a very, how should I say, variety of people in our discussion. So let's talk. Let's start actually from those companies who are producing something. So I would like to ask maybe first of all, Ieva, how do you manage sustainability in the supply chain? Because I think we've listened to the nice examples from large corporations, and that's clear that they have long traditions, they know how to do it. But you are a really tiny company. How do you manage sustainability in your supply chain?
So in our case, since day one, Kvapų namai have actually been focusing on sustainability because we think that sustainability and quality of product goes very well and they go hand in hand. So that means that in our case, the more sustainable our supply chain is, the more the product itself is, it has a better quality. So to give you an example, we work mostly with small farms, small manufacturers all around the world. So they grow their own materials, they take care of it, they harvest it, they distill it, then they actually, kind of divide it and then supply it directly to sellers such as Kvapų namai. And they do the same for a lot of different companies around the world. So we have the pleasure of having a very, very small supply chain, which means, it is actually more sustainable that way. And we try to keep these connections in line with any kind of new materials that we source, and also to have this kind of close relationship with them. So to travel, to see the ways that they are working in, to actually make sure, not just from the way that they are portraying themselves, let's say online or via emails or anything, but actually seeing with our own eyes if they're truly sustainable, if they're truly doing the things that they claim that they do. And most times that we collaborate with the small firms, it is actually that way, so it's really nice to see that. And I feel like because we work in such a area that is focusing on health, they have a lot of appreciation for earth, a lot of appreciation for the raw materials. That means that they are actually interested in sustainability topics. So it's not something that we have to force on them, but rather it comes naturally from them as well.
Oh, that's really interesting. Okay, then I should ask Vaida how Ekornes is managing sustainability in supply chain.
Well, we are quite enough, actually, quite lucky because we have an internal supply chain. Ekornes Group has several factories in different parts of the world. In Norway, in Lithuania, in Thailand, in Vietnam, and our core values are the same since we are basically same company, and therefore we have same requirements for the components we need. We have same ideas, same priorities, and we all are coming from a long time ago. We are sustainable as a company because since the beginning our first factories were sustainable and 100% green choices. For example, in Norway, the factory's powers is 100% from hydropower. In Lithuania, the factory uses only geothermal energy. So we have those core values. It's not something new or something additional for us. And for external, let's say external suppliers, for example, we use certification. I can give you an example about wood. Today, somebody has already mentioned the FSC standard. We are a FSC certified producer and trader, and we, by being certified, we can get to the beginnings of each tree. In the warehouse, we have a plywood, but we can follow back it to the forest and know where that birch grew up. So we're basically having everything under control, under same values and strategies.
Yeva mentioned that you have a direct contact with suppliers and you talk a lot. Is it valid for larger companies?
Yes, of course. We have Also, we have Ecornes has a supplier code of conduct based on requirements, on legal requirements, ethical requirements, and we also check it by visiting our suppliers, even our sister companies, because, well, nobody is 100% sure that everything is actually under control, and as Yeva said, that everything is as good as said, as good as portrayed. We always have to keep our finger on the pulse and check everything by, as I've mentioned, by visiting, by auditing, asking for risk assessments, and so on. I don't know.
That's right. You already started to talk about the barriers, because the other question I wanted to ask also, sorry, still Yeva and Vaida, about the main barriers in making your supply chain sustainable, because I hear that it's not that easy.
I think that in our case, everything is more or less under control, but what I have experienced myself, that sometimes if the supplier is not, for example, in European Union, the level of knowledge might be different, and then it takes more time to get to the result that you need, to the result that you want. So you may need to put more input.
In our case, I can say that we mostly work with European Union companies, so we don't necessarily have these kind of issues. However, we do have this case that due to seasonality and due to what's going on around, we don't always have the supply for some of the products. So in our company, we do have to make these kind of conscious decisions of, do we want to have this kind of unit in line? Should we rather communicate to customers why we don't have this product in line and then offer something else? So it's always about balance between actually choosing the raw material itself or just communicating differently with the customers.
And I would like to add that also sometimes an issue is a different regulation, law regulation. If the supplier is in our case, for example, in Thailand, although it is our sister company, but their regulation might be different, and we might need to pay more attention and solve a little more details.
That's right, because you already started to talk about the third countries, and I will dare to steal one question from Tadas, because Giedrė knows, I guess, a lot about the regulations for third countries and OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises. That's they take care a lot for supply chain.
Yes, I believe for those people who do not like to read long legal documents before they go to sleep, OECD guidelines on responsible business could be really helpful in this kind of situations, because OECD guidelines cover a lot of topics which are also covered by national laws or international laws, but they are very different around the globe. And differently from many of the laws, OECD guidelines go beyond, because they see, not because guidelines, but because the society see companies responsible not only for their direct behavior, but also for the behavior along the value creation chain, which is also the supply chain. So for the companies are expected around the globe to be responsible for their behavior, to be really cautious, to carefully analyze their supply chain. And this could be really difficult when the supply chains are remote, or when you are a very small company and you do not have leverage against your big suppliers. So OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises and also accompanying guidance documents on due diligence could be a very useful tool for anybody who's starting the sustainability journey, but also for really established companies to set up their policy, to embed all the sustainability related issues in their governance, to set up risk management mechanism. And also, even for small companies, they provide tips, really practical tips, how to pursue those goals. Not to say I'm too small, I cannot require anything from my very remote supplier. So guidelines could be really like a handbook, like a toolkit. They really provide practical tips, so you can just open it and just make a spreadsheet and implement in your policies. So I think it's really good.
Yeah. So indeed, the requirements for supply chain, they are increasing every year, every month, and we saw about EU legal environment, which is imposing, in the future will be imposing even bigger requirements. Still, Yeva and Vaida, what is the best governance for supply chain? Like, what methodologies do you use? Well, you said certification, that's one methodology. What else? Checking, audits? Like how?
If I can see from my point of view, in our case, because we're so small, we do have these kind of barriers of entries that you were talking about. So in our case, it's just a strong connection with the suppliers and actually making sure that your values align. Because obviously if you work with the wholesalers, it's a completely different story, but when you work with small firms, they do not have enough, let's say, financing to actually get those certifications in line. So in our case, what we do and how we govern is that we communicate with the suppliers, we make sure that they're kind of upholding the ideas that are important to us, and then we kind of compromise maybe a little bit on the parts of supply chain that they do. So for example, we invest in quality assurance back like in Lithuania. So we would rather get materials from small local farms that we know that are sustainable, but do not have enough financing to prove it to the rest of the world that they are sustainable, and we can do that for them.
Yes, and about certification, I would like to point out that it is not necessary to have all the certificates that are related to your product. It might be enough to choose the most important ones, the most aligned ones with your product, with your values, and by certificating it, by getting a certificate, you will prove that your product aligns with some standards that are very relevant, and each day each customer is getting more and more educated by himself, by internet, by any means, and certification is getting more and more important even for the end consumer.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Very interesting. Was very interesting, and I would like to go one step back from the company, from legislation to the people, and I would like to ask Laura, what are the challenges of the supply chain manager in nowadays in our geopolitical situation? So maybe you can say more about this specific manager position.
It's difficult to hire them. That is the main issues. And Inga from IKEA asked me today also, how is the situation with the supply managers? It is difficult. Yes, it is. It's difficult because supply chain managers, they could work and they could grow up only in two industries. It's in the retail industry. So it's really sad that RIMI representatives are not there. And in manufacturing. So only two industries are hiring these experts, and we have not enough very high qualification in our companies. So that's the main challenge, to find the right person.
And what kind of skills maybe you can say? Of course, I understand this is can be different in different area, but maybe you can case skills for that specific position can say.
So today we are talking about sustainability. So this skill to work in sustainable way is very important, and we are lacking of this skill too, because it's we do not have a long history then this skill was needed in our companies. We do not have a lot of possibilities to study at the university and gain this this experience and skill also. So we need more time.
And the last question for you, not last in general, but last at the moment, do you feel that business intents, did the business intents growing up during these years? You mentioned that today you talked with the director of IKEA about that, so it was very interesting to hear that.
Is the need increasing?
You mean
from
business side, yeah.
Yes, from business asking of business asking to you to find, and this is regular or now in these days because the sustainability topic is more and more interesting from everybody.
I can't say that the demand of supply chain managers are increasing, but increasing the expertise of these managers. So the qualification should be higher and higher. So that is the issue for supply chain managers.
Okay.
Growing expertise.
Thank you very much. And Siva, Gedre, want to
May I add
it?
some
Please.
additional remark? As you have heard today that many legislative initiatives are coming, EU-wide and also worldwide, and probably the most important will be the sustainability reporting directive and the standard which is now being prepared. And just a practical tip for the businesses who are here, training of the staff on the sustainability issues will be one of the key reporting data points. So it means that you have to, as a business, you have to think of that not only that you have to have one sustainability manager, but you have to really train your personnel. You have to train like everybody in your company on sustainability issues because it will affect various business operations. So this will be one of the data points which you will have to report.
And I have additional question also to Laura. Is it what you say? Does it ring a bell to the educational institutions? Because they do probably have some specialization in supply chain, I suppose. But sustainable supply chain, I haven't met that program yet.
Me either. So I think, and we could see the same problem in organizations. So I've done a research in advertising, job advertising this week in Lithuania, in Sweden, and in Germany, and I was surprised that I was read a lot of job advertising requirements, and in supply chain managers requirements, it was no sentence about sustainability. No in Lithuania, no in Sweden, no in Germany. So a lot of companies, what you said already, they hire sustainability manager, and he or she should be responsible for politics. But not a lot of companies do have sustainability in DNA. So I think sustainability is not only important for supply chain managers, but also for another managers too. HR, marketing, sales, manufacturing manager, plant manager, and etc. So, and I think we have to change our point of view not only to supply chain managers that they should work in sustainable way, but also whole company.
Sure, that's exactly what Giedrė mentioned, that we have to train about sustainability all the team, and and probably not only the team. Am I right that you have sometimes companies train also the suppliers also, because that would be probably the case, how to deal with those who are not complying, but you cannot find the other supplier. Ieva, Vaida, Giedrė? Have you did any training for your suppliers? Vaida?
Well, as I've mentioned, our main suppliers are our sister companies. So as trained as we are, as trained they are.
Okay, so that's not the case.
For me personally, I haven't endured it yet, because we do work with a lot of companies that are generally conscious because they work with raw materials. So they know the issues that we're facing, and we kind of select the suppliers that meet our values as well. So we haven't endured those yet, just maybe the wholesalers, but in that case, because we're too small, so we cannot kind of bargain in that kind of way. So we are waiting for the regulations to kick in, so they kind of help us out when we demand stuff for sustainability.
Yeah, we see in the market that especially consultancy and banks, they already embarked programs for their employees to train entire staff on the sustainability issues. So probably it will come step by step. Maybe first of all, those businesses which now have to deal with sustainability regulatory issues maybe, and then probably later on others will follow.
Yeah, that's right. And still, let's go back to OECD guidelines to multinational enterprises, because I think this mechanism of complaining, method of mediating the conflicts, it might be between suppliers and producers, it might be between NGO world or whatever other stakeholders. But do you think this might be an incentive for companies to think more seriously about sustainability in the supply chain? Because many companies, they concentrate narrowly on their own activities. And now, of course, the CO2 emissions scope 3 that will make a difference. But are there cases in the OECD environment on that?
Yes, so our national contact point, we are not regulatory institutions, so we cannot impose fines. What we can do, when we receive a complaint and we do not manage to find a solution for the parties, then we can make it public that the company, for example, did not comply with the responsible business conduct. And what this means, it can have very negative impact on companies' reputation, which in turn will negatively impact even financial possibilities of the company when the banks will evaluate their, for example, credibility. So I always tell people about very interesting situations where you as a business can face complaints where you don't even think that such things can happen because you do not, for example, have direct relationship. So there was one case in the UK, and the UK National Contact Point received a complaint from the Palestinian NGO, lawyers NGO, who were complaining against a UK-based manufacturer of demolition and construction producer, which equipment, machinery was used by another company in Palestine to demolish their houses. So although the UK company had really no direct involvement in those demolitions, they only sold their machinery, the NGO found a way to actually complain, to do something, because obviously they cannot submit the direct complaint against those companies who were demolishing their homes. And what they were actually successful, although this UK company did not receive fine or something, but the national contact point made a very thorough analysis of their governance, of their supply chain due diligence processes, and they found that the company, the UK company, although, as I said, really not active and not involved in any demolition actions, but they did not even have a policy to check where their goods, where the machinery is being sold, whether this machinery can be used for violation of human rights or something. So you probably would not think of that kind of mechanism in your company, but this is what you should think of. And the OECD guidelines and the accompanying due diligence guidance can help you think of this kind of issues along the entire value chain. So it's really, really good example. And just like very short, very recent example. 2 weeks ago, very well-known Danish apparel company was so-called freezed of any charges because their supply sourcing activities in Myanmar. They were accused of some connection with military, which, as you may know, last year were really making bad human rights violations in that country. And since the bestseller, the Danish company, had amazingly good policies, they were really active, they really were involved also in the context with policymakers, with NGOs, with all the stakeholders. So they were really aligned with the OECD guidelines. They were freed. The OECD National Contact Point said that they did everything right. There is nothing to complain about. So this is a good example what to do and how you can save your reputation even if somebody wants to complain.
Thanks, and yes, please,
So
Laura.
thank you that you mentioned NGO. So now I will change my shoes and now I will represent Red Cross. I'm in Red Cross, I'm volunteering in Red Cross, and Red Cross globally has 40 million volunteers. And the main duty for volunteering is because the climate is changing. What does it mean? 40 million volunteers do huge impact to companies to stop that, because we need such a big amount of people to dealing with consequences. So it's also very, very huge power and very important movement.
Yeah, so NGOs are the main complainants at the national contact points. So NGOs are the first one and the most active watch.
Yeah, and I think there is OECD Watch organization who definitely spots on all those misconductors or businesses who obey the OECD principles. And in Lithuania, we do not have, well, we have one case in a pipeline yet, but it's not that much used. But it's just a question of time. And I think we have to start thinking about what I am doing in my direct activities and what are my suppliers doing and how they impact climate, people, society. But actually, that was the question to Ludwig, as unfortunately he's not here. So I would like now to ask all of you to think about it. How to negotiate with the supplier to invest in sustainability when it's not mandatory, but only recommended? Because there are many cases when legally it's not necessary, but you just want it to be sustainable.
I think we just need to create a demand for it, because if that is something that we take into consideration and that we make it a priority, then they will have no other choice but to oblige.
Mm-hmm. And maybe use the wokeness of sustainability, because everybody everywhere now is thinking about it. Now is, for example, I go to the shop to buy, I don't know, a sweater. I see that it is from sustainable sources. I might don't want to see it, I might don't want to know it, but this information is getting in people's attention, and they are starting basically to need it. And I think from my company, from Ekornes, we have never set a goal to get the lowest price. We sell a comfort product, and our end consumer knows that he buys not only a recliner, but he buys a quality and a tool, a furniture that it will serve to him for several years, even for a lifetime. So maybe we should we shouldn't pay so much attention to mandatory or non-mandatory. We should encourage our suppliers, encourage ourselves, encourage our competitive companies to be bigger, to do better.
It was very interesting to listen to you. I write down a lot of remarks for myself, basically. But our time is almost done, and I will ask Giedrė and all of you we will start from Giedrė, final remarks and final thing what you can say for the audience here and on other side of the screen. So Giedrė.
Okay, I have three, so I will try to be very short. First of all, for those who are not lawyers and who, as I said, do not like read legal things, just Google OECD e-platforms. There you can access really user-friendly material with videos and PDFs, which is really nice for like a regular person to get to understand the responsible business background. And this is important because the mandatory regulation framework is coming, so everybody will need to do that. Till this comes, till the EU legislation will be in force, you can already start implementing this now. And since the OECD guidelines is really the original of all the EU legislation, so by implementing it now, today, you will be well prepared for the future. And the last remark, before you start understanding the sustainability or responsibleness of the business, try to set up your mindset as to see the sustainability, not only as the risk, because the legislation will see it as the risk, as your business risk. Try to see it as opportunity. And with this mindset, you will start seeing the sustainability differently, and this will definitely help you to achieve your goals.
Thank you, Giedrė. Eva?
I would say that I think we should all start from ourselves and just have a look at how we are working and how we're maintaining sustainability in our own workplaces, because then you can easily translate it to your suppliers, you can easily translate it to your customers, and just kind of create sustainability all around. So just making sure that you are speaking about it, that you're investing your time in it, and if you feel like you need some guidance, finding the people around yourself that actually know more about this topic and can enlighten you and help you go through that path. So, yep.
Thank you.
Yes, on that note, I would say that in order to be successful in a sustainable way in the business, we have to analyze very good the industry where we are and set a good example. Look around and watch what your competitive companies are doing. Maybe they are doing something better than you. Learn from that. Maybe they are doing something worse than you. Don't do that. It is as simple as that. And of course, I would say that we even should start from ourselves, not as business or government representatives. We should start from ourselves as a person, to look what we are doing, to look what we are choosing, to look how we are acting. And don't forget that sustainability is not only about environmental issues, because I think we little bit get get caught up here, but it also has to do with social, with cultural stuff. So keep in mind that.
Thank you, Vaida. Laura?
Supply chain managers who has experience to work in a sustainable environment, they earn more and they are more popular in the labor market.
Wow. I think that was really invitation to join team of sustainable supply chain managers. Actually, I think we are suppliers in our families, aren't we? And I like very much your remark that we have to vote with our purse every day, because when you start being sustainable in your daily environment, you cannot be unsustainable in your business environment, because that's your life and you are responsible what you are doing with it. So let's go for green supply chain everywhere. And we have actually vice chairperson at the Swedish Chamber of Commerce who also couldn't make a trip to here. But I think Akvilė Skiparė, she's online. And Akvilė, yes, Akvilė is here. So maybe we should move a little bit. Akvilė is here, yeah. Okay. Hi, Akvilė. So you've been listening to the event. You've been listening to all speakers and all panelists. You listened to our conversation. Please, your closing remarks.
What an exciting afternoon. So thank you, Audrona and Tadai and all the prominent speakers and participants. Just let me reflect that during the time that Sustainability Summit has been taking place, that is almost a decade, we have seen substantial change in how consumers, corporates, institutions, as well as regulators are talking about sustainability and changes in supply chain management in particular. And we've discussed that while the threats stemming from geopolitical contexts exist, the positive factor is that the private sector influence is gaining momentum. So the Nordic and the local statistics that were cited today are, yes, still different. However, the trend is the same. Focus is shifting from cost to opportunity, and the attention on board levels is increasing. So the key aspect here would be the sense of urgency for all market participants, not only the leaders or the ones that regulations are applicable or are about to be applicable to. Why? The global companies are announcing supply chain related targets and commitments, and they are forming a mega trend. This naturally means that changes that are being introduced ripple down to the requirements to the supply chain partners. Therefore, they may be less time than participants estimate to introduce the changes to still be relevant, and they may fail supply partner assessment. And even though it is on top of the baseline legal requirement. So I would like to leave with you with these questions. Where as a company are you now? Where you would like to be? And how will you measure it? Will you lead the way, be the creator, paving the road in most cases too, or showing the way for policymakers to drive the progress? Would you be an adaptive opportunist? Or would you be passive, bare minimum requirements implementator, still maybe searching for loopholes? That is a survivor mode, risking to fall behind the curve, and the blind zones are very costly. So today we've seen numerous examples to take inspiration from, the companies that are leading the way. And so I wish you not to underestimate the power of cooperation that speeds up the changes. Let's use our voices, as we just heard in the panel. Let's use our bargaining power. Let's open up that latitude of opportunities. This would put us even on a more solid track in reaching global goals. And finally, a very important part, kudos to the forward-focused organizers crew that have been organizing the summit for almost a decade. So the Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish chambers of commerce and respective embassies, with special thanks this year to the Swedish embassy, as well as the Office of the Nordic Council of Ministers and the Lithuanian Responsible Business Association, LABA. Thank you as well to our sponsors, Zoom TV, Mano Bankas, 15 Minutes, and finally, to IKEA Industry Lietuva that is hosting us. So a special round of applause as well. The event would not happen without your support. And see you next year for the celebratory 10th Sustainability Summit.
Thanks, Akvile. So indeed, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for contributing to regional development, because it's not often when we're having summits in Kazlų Rūda. And I would just like to wish you that you should go out with the understanding that sustainable supply chain, it's not a new concept. It's a thing that will keep you on the top of the competition, and sustainability, it's absolute must. Let's meet next year in the 10th Nordic Baltic Sustainability Summit. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.